I'm Steve Morgan, founder of Cybersecurity Ventures and editor-in-chief at Cybercrime magazine. I'm here today with Oz Alashe, founder and CEO at CybSafe, a security awareness training company based in London. Evolution Equity TV is brought to you by Evolution Equity Partners, an international venture capital investor partnering with exceptional entrepreneurs to develop market-leading cybersecurity and enterprise software companies. To learn more about Evolution Equity Partners, visit evolutionequity.com. Oz, welcome. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks so much for having me.
So Oz, you have a fantastic background. Before we get started, I'd like to, hear a little bit more about it. I know our listeners would. You spent nearly 17 years as a British Army officer, if I have that right, with the UK Ministry of Defence. I think you started there in the late 1990s. Tell us about that and how you ultimately got into our field.
Yeah, so you're right. I did start in the British military, so I'm a former army officer. I commissioned. So in that particular case, I went to our equivalent. I guess the closest thing you'll have here is, a West Point. We have a Royal Military Academy, Sandhurst. I went there as straight after university, having studied economics. I joined the army. I very quickly decided to volunteer for service with UK Special Forces and ended up spending 12 of my 17 years focused on counter-terrorism and national security and covert intelligence. So whilst there, I got to spend a fair bit of time chasing unpleasant people around the world, trying to dissuade unpleasant people from being quite so unpleasant. And we had to find them first. We also had to understand how they funded themselves. So I got a really good look and understanding of how people made mistakes with technology in order to enable us to find them. People also abused technology in order to steal money from other people and fund themselves. And quite a lot of organized cybercrime goes on to fund more nefarious activities. So my introduction to cybersecurity was actually through the world of counterterrorism and national security.
So we were familiar with your company, but learned much more about you from Richard Seawald and Evolution Equity Partners. They led a recent investment into your company. I believe it was $28 million. How did you meet Richard and the people at Evolution Equity, and how important is that raise for the company? Is that a milestone for you?
Yeah, well, it is definitely a milestone, and in particular, not just the sum, but also, of course, the opportunity to be supported by and work with a brilliant investment partner in the form of Evolution Equity Partners. In terms of how we came across them, actually, of course, Evolution have got a wonderful reputation in the space, and we were really keen to make sure that our Series B, we've things have been going well for us as we've been focused on and trying to tackle this issue of managing human risk from an intelligent and data-driven and science-driven space. And Evolution Equity Partners were well known to us because they have such a wonderful track record of working with great companies, working with interesting founders, and also, of course, having a number of successes in the security space. So they were on a pretty tight list for us. Rather helpfully, we have had some success with some large telcos and indeed some large organizations, and a couple of the companies who've also sold into them have worked with Evolution. So we were given an opportunity and an introduction, and it became very clear that we were nicely aligned on our obsession over tackling this big issue, the human aspect of cybersecurity, and in particular moving beyond tick box awareness training and phishing simulations to actually fundamentally transforming the way society addresses human risk. And so that was, in that sense, a match made in heaven.
Right. So let's talk a little bit more about that and what the company does. The security awareness market is enormous. We've sized it. We've put out a lot of research. It's a crowded market, if you want to call it that. I don't know that I necessarily would, just because the revenue opportunity is so great. But there are a lot of companies. There's quite a few new market entrants we're seeing every year. So what is your unique value proposition? How is CybSafe different than other companies in the market?
So as you say, that the market is big and it's getting bigger, and indeed, as you say, it's also crowded. There are lots of players in the space who are, in essence, in many ways, in some ways, trying to do the same thing, but actually taking a very different approach. But we would actually contend that people aren't trying to do the same thing, really, if you were to look at what they're trying to do. Most security professionals recognize that the human aspect of cybersecurity is important. But actually, for too long, as a community, we have tried to train or educate our way out of this challenge. The belief being that if you educate people, they will be more better behaved when it comes to security, and that will reduce risk. There is no evidence to suggest that education and behavior change are linked, or indeed that reduces risk. So that is the problem that we are focused on at CybSafe. We have actually built a mobile app and a web app that influences user security behavior and has the data to demonstrate that it is more effective than, for example, just bombarding people with information or hitting them up with phishing simulations continually. The other thing that most people don't realize is that actually phishing simulations, or indeed tackling phishing simulations will address who clicks and who reports. That's just two behaviors amongst a whole panoply of behaviors that you should be addressing if you want to address phishing, for example, as a risk outcome, or malware infection introduced by phishing. So the unique selling point for CybSafe is that what we do is built on the world's most comprehensive security behavior database. We've literally cataloged every single security behavior and articulated its linkage to the risk outcomes that most security professionals are concerned about. Everything we do is built on a sound evidence research base, and we probably have the most comprehensive research base or research team focused on this sole issue and a number of academic partnerships that really support that. And then our data that we produce is specifically designed to give an insight and a level of visibility that organizations can't get into human risk right now. And then finally, the way in which we have delivered the platform through the mobile app and the web app, and the nudges and the alerts and the prompts mean that users get help and support rather than more education. And that's really key because we see significant improvements in behaviors as a result.
So Oz, there's so many reasons to train employees at companies. We could probably sit here for an hour now and walk through all of them. But let me just zero in on one of the really big problems we have in the industry and society, and that would be ransomware. We've been tracking this very closely. Last year, 2021, we estimated damages globally of about $20 billion. And that's up 57 times what it was in 2015. We don't see that problem going away. It's intensifying. We're seeing more and more ransomware attacks. So talk to us about ransomware, how your platform helps with that. Any advice or commentary you have for CISOs who are tuned in and watching us today?
Yeah, well, again, it's a really great point because, of course, a number of organizations are really concerned with ransomware. And at CybSafe, we recognize that and, of course, are concerned by it too. But we're really focused on the risk outcomes that effectively might lead to or be stem from ransomware. So I talked about malware infection, as ultimately ransomware is a malware infection issue. So there are a series of security behaviors that you should be addressing if malware infection is the outcome you wish to avoid. And of course, if ransomware is your concern, then malware infection is the thing that you want to avoid. Those behaviors include, as we've discussed before, getting people not to check emails before they click on links, reporting suspicious emails, but they also include getting people to check the default settings on their privacy accounts, on their social media accounts, or asking people to be more careful about what they share on social media, because these things make it easier for ransomware groups to plan and conduct their attacks. There are so many security behaviors associated with ransomware that most organizations aren't even addressing beyond telling people through training that they should take these things seriously. As I said, you can tell people as much as you like, we're not seeing the changes in behavior. CybSafe, we're trying to focus on actually changing those specific behaviors.
So as we work with a lot of large Fortune 500 CISOs, Global 2000 CISOs, mid-market enterprises, and these are all companies who have CISOs. They have security teams. Security awareness training is a standard. They may or may not be doing it right, but they're working at it. They have a lot of resources. I get really concerned about the smaller businesses who don't have those teams, don't have that type of leadership, yet they're at risk. More than 50% of cyber attacks are on small businesses globally. Speak to the small business market. How can you help them? How can they help themselves because they don't have those resources?
Yeah, so it's a really good point. And actually so many, the kind of security poverty line, as it's often described in different other parts of the world, is really very real, and we should recognize it. It is a tough landscape for small businesses to navigate right now, given that they are equally under threat, and of course forming the supply chains of many of the larger organizations too. So what we've realized at CybSafe is actually when it comes to security for small organizations, one of the barriers for adoption for small organizations is actually ease with which they can implement some of the solutions. So at CybSafe, we think it's incredibly important that we make it really simple for organizations who decide that they want to either just be compliant and deliver security awareness training for their people, or reduce risk. They're not quite sure the details. They certainly aren't full of behavioral scientists like our team are, but they do realize that their people components are important, but they need to be able to do it easily. How can they deploy a solution out of the box that gives people not just training, but actually nudges and supports and helps them see and report and maybe track any reduction over time? The truth is that when it comes to really small organizations, we see very few of them too concerned about the data and the metrics and the visibility. It's the ease that they choose CybSafe for. It's the reason why they choose the solution like that helps them be compliant in a really quick way that they can manage with very few people. But as they grow, or indeed as they find themselves involved in the supply chains of larger organizations, they find themselves being asked questions like, how are you actually reducing risk or protecting the data of the companies that they form the supply chain for? And therefore they need to be able to demonstrate some form of tracking that they are actually doing what they're doing properly.
So Oz, before we let you go, you have to tell us about PeepSec. Very interesting event. I was poking around trying to get some background information on it. CybSafe calls it the world's only 100% free, 100% virtual summit on the ever-changing relationship between people and technology. So elaborate, tell us, what exactly is PeepSec?
Well, we love PeepSec because it's an opportunity, I guess, in many ways, a digital festival, a virtual festival, to have a bunch of conversations and hear from a bunch of voices from around the globe who are thinking about the intersection between people and technology and some of the really quite complex issues that arise from that. It takes place during London Tech Week, which in itself is a festival of technology that happens every year at the beginning of the summer. And as you say, it's a free event that anybody can dial in for, and anybody can attend those in-person events whenever we have them. But the truth is that actually what we really want to do is give voice to people who are thinking about some excellent and really interesting challenges. So, for example, we talk to people about some of the privacy issues surrounding some really innovative technologies that are being used to help people communicate in really interesting ways. We talk about some of the ethical issues that arise from the deployment of technology into certain communities or into certain regions without really thinking about the second and third order effects of them. We also, of course, talk about some of the security issues that arise from maybe our ever increasing connectedness, digitization, in many ways bombarding people with new ways in which they can live their lives. We also celebrate some of the really amazing things that are being done with technology, people taking technology and solving some really big challenges within the world, within health tech, for example, within finance tech. And we think all of those things should be celebrated. So it's a real panoply of conversations. It's called PeepSec. Of course, that kind of is a throw to people security, but it's not just about security conversations. It's about people and technology conversations, which of course many of our security issues emanate from.
So when does it take place, and how do people register if they want to be a part of it?
So it takes place during London Tech Week, which is June every year, and it's a virtual event. We publicize the information and the opportunity for people to sign up through our website, through our social media channels, and then through many of our partners, whether that's the London Tech Week website and then through. And so we've had some fantastic people from across the community, the security community, and outside, well outside of security as well. And people can sign up whenever we go live. We will start recording for the next set of PeepSec interviews, I suspect, in around the March April time.
Well, CybSafe is hot. We're going to be continuing to track you, and I hope you'll come back on with us early next year.
We look forward to it, and thank you so much for the opportunity. It's been great to talk to you.
I'm Steve Morgan, founder of Cybersecurity Ventures and editor-in-chief at Cybercrime magazine. Joining us today was Oz Alashe, founder and CEO at CybSafe, a security awareness training company based in London. Evolution Equity TV is sponsored by Evolution Equity Partners, an international venture capital investor partnering with exceptional entrepreneurs to develop market-leading cybersecurity and enterprise software companies. Visit evolutionequity.com to learn more. You can keep up with all of our media at cybercrimemagazine.com.